And here we are. We have now got the Tiki's eyes completely covered. Bits of it are already starting to dry a little bit, and I've also covered around the top of the edges here. You can see I've put pieces all around, making sure you've got overlap, everything laying around it. And I've gone with a second layer right over the join there so that it makes sort of a smooth transition there. Bits and pieces are going to lift up, and that's not anything to worry about, as long as it's not everything lifting up, but a little bit of lift up is not going to be a big problem, because what's going to happen is after the entire tiki is skinned and allowed to dry for a little while, I'm going to put a layer of paint over the whole thing, and that paint will soften the topmost layer of the paint and glue, and you can kind of smooth things a little bit, and almost acts like sandpaper over the surface, and it gives it a nice smooth finish, and that's what we're looking for. So as long as everything is covered, you want all of your flattish surfaces, like the edges of the top here and around the mouth especially, to be multiple layers of paper so that they're not thin like just paper, and we can kind of perpetuate that illusion that this is made out of a much more solid material than just paper mache. You'll notice that I've got the eyebrows all smoothed in. I've added layers to make it a very smooth transition. Some of the detail along the bottom edges of the eyes is going to be lost, and that's fine, because when I go to paint it on there, it'll be a little more free-form to whatever I want it to be, as opposed to what it actually cut out. The eyes that are glued on there just kind of give you a little bit of a rise in their little dimensionality, and what you paint on there is what really sells it. So we're ready now. We're going to work on the nose and the front area here in the chin. And once all of that is on there, I believe this is if this is sufficiently dry back here, we'll go ahead and we'll fill in the mouth too, and we'll have this thing done. And tomorrow, after it's had time to dry thoroughly, we'll put a layer of paint on it, and it'll be ready for the process of everything else. I've gone ahead and pulled off some paper. Got some ready going here. I'm going to lay it in my bucket, get it up on the sides so that it can be dripping a little bit. I've got fairly big pieces and fairly small pieces. I'm going to use the small pieces around the mouth and what have you. I'm going to use the bigger pieces actually inside the mouth. We do the inside of the mouth last, and that's a pretty important thing, because we want it to be pretty solid until you want that to remain as dry as possible. I've got a triangular piece here again, and I'm just going to there's a join right there on the top edge of that nostril, and this piece is a little big, so what's going to happen is I'm just going to let it tear ever so slightly and allow it to lay flat that way. And I've just completely filled that gap around the top edge of the nostril, and that is what I wanted. Pull this around where we can see it a little better. And got another. This is a pretty good sized piece, triangular piece. I can't emphasize enough, you want triangular pieces, because they just allow you to lay things so much smoother. Just lay that right in there, and there is the front side of that. And that big gap that was there in the nose is just gone. Just filled it right in with just that one little piece of paper. We'll lay another smaller piece kind of on the back side of it, just to make sure that gap is filled. And there it is. Got a little bit much water on there. Just shake it into the bucket, and there it is. Now that gap is completely filled, and I'll wrap around that with more smallish triangles and get ourselves the shape we're looking for. In fact, I'm going to use a largest triangle. I'm going to tear it in half here. Cool thing about triangles, you tear them in half, you have two triangles. And that's what we want, more triangles. I'm just going to wrap them The wide end of it on the flat area and narrower part of it on the curving surface. Just tear that one too. I'm just going to flip this one just like that. I'm going to lay that longer piece right across the top of it, and now everything is smooth, and we're starting to build thickness there, and that will give a little bit of roundness to the corners and things too, which is also not a bad idea. The less it looks like it's made out of paper, the happier I'll be, because that's what I want. I'll just take and wrap that around. The big pieces will just smallen that. We'll come back to this side. We've got more triangular shapes and more triangular paper. And we'll just lay that right in there. And there it is. And I don't want to completely, I want to keep that sort of compound curve in there because it's just cool looking. So when I wrap around this, I want to make sure that I've got some curving paper. Just didn't want to tear the way that I wanted it to, but that's going to be fine. And you can see I've got a edge hanging over here, and I don't want that, so I'm just going to pull that so I don't have just an edge, and so I can fold it flat. And that's a pretty important little detail there. You don't want that hanging off because it's harder to lay it flat. So we'll fold it over, make sure it's got sufficient moisture in the paper to do that. Just smooth all that on there. There we go. Now there's a pretty big opening under here, and I'm going to take a fairly large piece of paper and just completely enclose that. I think that ought to do it right there. This is where having the mouth opening the size of your hand comes in real handy, because I can hold it by the mouth opening. And there it is. I just laid that right in there, and it's completely closed that gap, and I will come back and add some smaller pieces to smooth it out. Big mistakes that people make in skinning their tikis is using too large pieces of paper and not smoothing them down, not putting enough moisture in the paper, or putting too much. There's a fine line. Just going to wrap this around, and that should do it. I'm going to pull this piece around this straight corner. Nope, don't want it on the edge. There we go. And that fills the gap on that side. And I'll just wrap that around with smaller pieces like this one right here. And there it is. And I'll put another piece right there. Actually, that piece right there wants to do it, doesn't it? Yes, it does. There it is. Bang. And right in there. And got that closed. A few more pieces here. Starting to stick to my tiki. Uh-oh, drop pieces of paper in there. No biggie. Let's just go ahead and tear off some. There we go. There we go. We'll put a piece just like that. Again, triangular shapes help the world go around. You can see now I've got that nose I've got to wrap this end and this end, but the front of it here is pretty well covered, a little bit more touching up to do. And I'll do that with smaller pieces of paper, but I'm not going to make you wait to see it. I'm going to stop the video. I'm going to cover the rest of the nose. I'm going to cover this area here, and I'll talk about it, and then we'll do the mouth.